In over 31,000 years, Thoth was the Egyptian god that was worshipped in pre-dynastic times. His veneration period is the longest one of all the deities in ancient Egypt. Thoth was the god of the moon, sacred texts, mathematics, the sciences, magic messenger and recorder of the deities, master of knowledge, and a patron to the scribes. His Egyptian name is Tahuti, which means he who is like the ibis. He is depicted as the ibis bird or a baboon. He is often shown in Egyptian hieroglyphics at the weighing of the heart ceremony and holding up the ankh to the lips of humans, offering them immortality for the afterlife. But where is he from? NASA has said they have discovered Planet X right outside our solar system. It is this Planet X that is mentioned in several of the Sumerian texts and shown within the Sumerian art pictorials. It described their planet as a place of beauty with their own spaceports, high in technology, rich in culture and tradition, and ruled by a king by the name of Anu with his two sons, Enki and Enlil. Their solar system was right next door to ours, and their planet was situated millions of miles away from their own sun. Who you are looking at here are the two sons of King Anu. Firstborn is Enki, born of a wife concubine. Secondborn is Enlil, born to the rightful queen. Their sister Ninmah, also named Neharshag, the son of Enki, Ningshita, who's also known as Thoth Hermes, his other son Marduk, and also by his names, and Enki's niece Inanna. NASA has even confirmed that when they did go to the moon, they found two bodies, one of them being a male that was gray, blue in color. You can find that link in the description box of this video. In one of the Sumerian tablets interpreted by Zechariah Sitchin, he named the Lost Book of Enki, states that the planet Nibiru left its own orbit in solar system and came into ours, and the gravitational pull from our sun drew it closer and closer, and it began to irradiate and destroy Nibiru's atmosphere, setting it ablaze, leaving a trail of gases behind it as a tail. The devastation described in the text states that it had killed off so much of their vegetation, their atmosphere had thinned, and the people were becoming burned by the radiation of the sun as it made its total orbit around our sun. Their former king, Elelu, had told them that he knew of a planet that had the mineral needed to heal their atmosphere. It was earth and it was gold. So they loaded up their ships and took their workforce, the YHWH, along with them to their trip to Earth. With them they took the Mies, which was always found in the Anunnaki's handbag. The Mies are also called the Tablets of Destiny. It described the Tablets of Destiny as being stored on a crystalline tablet or disc, very similar to what you see at the bottom of our screen to the left. We have a company right now in the U.S. that's developing this technology. Oddly enough, it is also called the Disc of Destiny. Wonder where they got that name. These covenant documents on these crystalline tablets contain the information about the all-creator of the multiverse, how the cosmos was created, how to travel throughout the universe, all the stars and planets, the cosmic map, the portals, the gateways, astrology, kingship, how to establish civilizations, DNA formulas for humanoids, animals, and plants, medical, science, technology, priestly rites, festivals, calendar events, rituals, enchantments, music, art, and more. I will provide the link that you can see the list of what all it contained inside the description box. As the Anunnaki began to build their elaborate cities and spaceports, it wasn't long before they had their YHWH workforce mining the gold. But it would take thousands of years of hard toil and labor on the YHWH to get back the quantity needed to help heal Nibiru's diminishing atmosphere. During this time, they rebelled against the Anunnaki. After much lost life on both sides, the two brothers came together to discuss what they could do to help alleviate the problem. Enki has suggested that he had seen one of the Homo erectus beings that were living on the planet and wanted to use it as a slave to replace the GG workforce. He only suggested that they would use a small, limited amount of their own genetic DNA material to help upgrade the animal, just enough so it could take command. After much debate, he finally got his brother Enlil to agree. Then he asked his sister Nimma and his son Ningshita, who both were scientists, to help him with the experiments to create a new being for their new enslaved workforce. Ningshita, feeling that this was not morally correct, he reluctantly agreed to help. For months they experimented with no success, and it finally had dawned on Nimma the problem was the container in which they were being carried in. She knew then she had to have a biological carrier incubator to help the pregnancy succeed. So she offered herself up along with all her medical females that she brought to the planet. After several months of experimenting and finally getting the codes right for the production of the brand new Adapa and Eve, they were successful in producing 6 identical male and female beings, however without reproduction capabilities. More years were spent training them and teaching them language so they could prepare to become the workforce that they desired. During that time, Ningshita threw himself into his religious studies and began to understand the mysteries of the cosmos and the all-consciousness of the universe. Thoth was not like his family that had such ambitions to conquer the entire planet. He was more focused on inner growth. As time went on, the human race's population slowly grew at a snail's pace, and Nimma realized that she and her nurses could not do this much longer, and so she approached Enki about giving the humans reproduction capabilities, which they called the knowledge of good and evil. Good meaning that they will be able to reproduce like the gods, but evil because it will dominate a man's mind till he becomes obsessed with sex and lust, leading to overpopulation. So the story that human beings have been told for centuries about how they ate of the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden from the tree of good and evil is all about sex. So when Enki agreed to do this, he had reminded his sister that Enlil would oppose and did not like the idea of giving them the capability to reproduce and giving them this knowledge. But Nimma was insistent, so they brought in Ningshita and asked him to perform the surgery. Once again, Ningshita agreed and complied with their wishes, but deep inside of him he knew it was not right to tinker with a living, spiritual, sentient being. It against the laws of the Galactic Federation and that of the all-consciousness within the quantum field that we call God. So he took this opportunity to do something incredible for the human race. He not only gave them the ability to reproduce, but he took a piece of special DNA found in some of the most enlightened beings, and he stuck it inside of us. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional when I talk about this. This special DNA was placed inside of a special time-released capsule. So when the time came for man to wake up consciously, mankind will finally understand who they are, what we are, and to realize what our final destiny is. Well, it wasn't long before Enlil realized that the human beings were procreating and they were covering themselves because they now had the knowledge of good and evil, making them aware that they were naked. Furious, he stormed into Enki, demanding an answer of why he would do such a thing. When Enki tried to explain the reasons why, Ninmah interrupted and tried to soothe the tempers between the two. But Enlil would not be persuaded otherwise. He demanded that the Adamu and Eves all be sent out of the garden, and for Enki and his kin to all leave Eridu, while he stayed behind in his location. And Enki, Marduk, Ningshita, and Ninmah all went to the far west and created Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. This created a lot of animosity for Marduk. He already felt like his father, being firstborn, was cheated out of his inheritance to the throne. So he felt that this was rightfully his, and he had quite the chip on his shoulder about what was happening between his father and his uncle. As time went on, both Enki and Enlil and their descendants were beginning to copulate directly with the slave race, therefore creating lighter races, and both were creating giants as offspring. Through them, Enki created the Atlanteans, which they knew him as the god Poseidon in Atlantis, and Enlil created the Hebrews, and they knew him as Yahweh. Both clans had now become greatly established upon the planet. All the while, Thoth was spending his time beneath the dwelling place under the earth's crust that was blasted by the great masters who were the children of light. We will pick up in Tablet 2, called the Halls of Amenti, on paragraph 3. Surrounded them by force and power, shielded from harm, they, the halls of the dead. Side by side then placed they other spaces, filled them with life and with light from above. Build they then the halls of Amenti, that they might dwell eternally there, living with life to eternity's end. 32 were there of the children, sons of light, who had come among men, seeking to free from bondage of darkness those who were bound by the force from beyond. Deep in the halls of life grew a flower, flaming, expanding, driving back the night, placed in the center a ray of great potence, life-giving, light-giving, filling the power all who came near it. Placed they around it thrones, 32, placed for each of the children of light, placed so that they were bathed in the radiance, filled with the life from the eternal light. There, time after time, placed they their created bodies, so that they might be filled with the spirit of life. 100 years out of each 1,000 must the life-giving light flame forth on their bodies, quickening, awakening the spirit of life. There in the circle from eon to eon sits the great masters, living a life not known among men. There in the halls of life they lie sleeping. Free flows their soul through the bodies of men. Time after time, while their bodies lie sleeping, incarnate they in the bodies of men, teaching and guiding onward and upward, out of the darkness into the light. There in the hall of life, filled with their wisdom, known not to the races of man, living forever 'neath the cold fire of life, sits the children of light. Times there are when they awaken, come from the depths to be lights among men, infinite they among finite. He who by progress has grown from the darkness, lift himself from the night into the light. Free is he made of the halls of Amenti, free of the flower of light and life. Guided he then by wisdom and knowledge passes from man to the master of life. There he may dwell as one with the masters, free from the bounds of the darkness of night. Seated within the flower of radiance sit 7 lords from the space-time above us, helping and guiding through infinite wisdom, the pathway through time of the children of men. Mighty and strange, they veiled with their power, silent, all-knowing, drawing the life force, different yet one with the children of men. Aye, different yet one with the children of light. Every day Thoth would make his trip down into the halls of Amenti, where he continued to write in the emerald tablets. One night while he was meditating, he heard the spirit of the dweller call him. This is the Holy Spirit. He explains what happens in his meditation. There before them was I led by the dweller, watched him blend with the one from above. Then from he came forth a voice saying, Great art thou, Thoth, among children of men, free henceforth of the halls of Amenti, master of life among children of men. Taste not of death except as thou will it. Drink thou of life to eternity's end. Henceforth forever is life, thine for the taking. Henceforth is death at the call of thy hand. Dwell here or leave here when thou desireth. Free is Amenti to the Son of Man. Take thou up life in what form you desireth. Child of the light that has grown among men. Choose thou thy work, for all souls must labor, never be free from the pathway of life. One step thou hast gained on the long pathway upward. Infinite now is the mountain of light. Each step thou taketh but heightens the mountain. All of thy progress but lengthens the goal. Approach ye ever the infinite wisdom. Ever before thee resides the goal. Free are ye, made now of the halls of Amenti, to walk hand in hand with the lords of the world. One in one purpose, working together, bringers of light to the children of men. Ever did Thoth grow in the power of the All. Now he knew that he was called to be the fisher of men. While Thoth was growing spiritually, his brother Marduk was growing in power. He was scheming and making his plans on how to dominate planet Earth. He got together several of the dark priests. They opened up a portal to let evil in so he could overtake everyone. And it wasn't by coincidence that Nibiru was coming back into our solar system, wreaking havoc upon all the planets and in the cosmos. Everything is made by design. And the dweller called unto Thoth and told him to gather up all of his documents, get into his ship, and go to the land of the hairy barbarian once the waters had receded, and teach them all that he has learned, and bring them up in consciousness. Then the dweller departed, and he went down with the Atlantis island, and the entire planet was covered in water. Enki had warned one of his favorite children, Noah, that's in the Bible. He and his family was saved by the ark that he was instructed to build several weeks earlier, which tells us that they had the knowledge of knowing that this would occur. When he approached Enlil about saving the humans, Enlil refused. He said, "Let them drown, let them die. I do not care." As most of the Anunnaki boarded their spaceships and watched what occurred below upon the earth, with all the humans screaming out for help, Nimma began to cry, "What are we doing? We're killing our own creation." She was sick with grief, and so was Enki. When the waters cleared, Thoth did as he was commanded, and he went to the land of Kim, which is modern-day Egypt. He brought them up to a level of society where they were considered the most dominant people of the time on our planet. They were rich in wealth, prosperity, health, and he opened up the schools as promised. He built all the pyramids, the Sphinx, and he was known far and wide for his intellect, his knowledge and skills, and his schools were famous all throughout the regions. Throughout his reign, he was considered the most revered god For his time, he was the priest king of the Egyptian people known as Tahuti or Thoth. When he finished the emerald tablets, they became implemented into the school where all could have access to the knowledge. During this time, Marduk rose up his own empire in Babylon as the god Baal, demanding human sacrifices. According to Egyptian priest Manetho, Thoth is responsible for writing over 36,000 books. Though many of his works have been lost to history, many have also been found and restored, and they are available for purchase in the English language if you so desire to have those. As Thoth's fame began to spread throughout Egypt and beyond into other countries, he began to be known by several different names according to different tongues and cultures. Here's just to name a few. Of course, he remained Ningshita to his own people, the Anunnaki, but he was also called Enoch to the Hebrews. Thoth also became associated with the famous library in Alexandria. Scholars and philosophers would flock to the seventh wonder of the ancient world, which was the lighthouse of Alexandria, Egypt, all just to visit and study in the vast selection of scrolls and sacred knowledge found only in the library of Alexandria. During Pharaoh Ptolemy's reign, which is Cleopatra's father, he required that anyone that wanted to enter into the library that they must bring other sacred texts and books as entry. When Ptolemy died and Cleopatra became queen of Egypt, she had a very special relationship with Thoth. She called him Serapis Bey. Serapis' followers throughout Egypt had sanctuaries that were called serapeums. There were several throughout Egypt, but some were stated to host the halls of Amenti within them, which were the sarcophagus that the masters would use to reincarnate their bodies that we learned in the Emerald Tablets of Chapter 2, the Halls of Amenti. These were generation chambers, kind of similar to what we would think was like the chambers we saw in the movie Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, they were hidden in plain sight, and the Egyptians came to know them as resurrection chambers, associated with their god Osiris as the god of resurrection and afterlife. But what better way to hide what their true purposes are? Today, we have several scholars that believe that this was actually associated with Thoth, who talks about immortality in most of his text. I will post those links in the description of this video. Greater still was the legend of Thoth, where every culture on the planet began to recognize him as the god of wisdom. Each culture had its own dialect and language. In Rome, he was called Mercury. In Greece, his most famous name has been Hermes Trismegistus, and Asclepius and Prometheus were just a few of the names that people began to call him. As Thoth Hermes began to age, he knew it was coming time for him to descend once again back down into the halls of Amenti to lay down this avatar and pick up a new body for the continuing great work that was assigned to him by the source of all. Throughout the thousands of years that he existed, he has taken on many forms, many names within many cultures. He knew mankind's nature of finding that they accept new information from people who were like themselves. So he felt it was necessary to come back with all the different types of races and names with languages, so each culture will understand the importance of the All's teachings. Egypt was at its pinnacle and height of technology and learning. While they were under the direction of Thoth, they prospered and grew in the sight of the All. With all these achievements, his brother Marduk became quite jealous of Thoth's success, and he wanted to possess Egypt himself. He went to his father and complained about his birthright and how he was cheated out of the throne because Enki couldn't stand up to his own brother, but he was going to do it himself. He'll stand up to his own brother. For the sake of peace, Enki asked Thoth to leave. Thoth, being the godly man that he was, he complied and did what his father wished. He boarded his spaceship and took off for Mesoamerica. According to research, Thoth entered into Mesoamerica at 2500 BC, and he stayed with these people for 4 millennia. He rose them in society by teaching them astrology, writing, calendars, and building their own pyramids. He was Quetzalcoatl to the Mayans, which is the feathered serpent, also called Itzamna to the Mayans, Kukulkan to the Aztecs, Viracocha to the Incas, and Sequoia to the Native Americans. Here's some interesting facts you might want to know about Thoth. Did you know that this person, avatar, divine entity, is actually pretty important to the United States? Let me show you why. This individual is plastered all over the Library of Congress doors. Of all of the entities and individual names we just spoke of. And you have to ask yourself, why? Well, I'm going to use the same old adage. It's hidden in plain sight. Personally, I think this tells me everything I need to know. Now back to the end of our story. Back home in Egypt, Marduk stole the name Ra from the sun god that Thoth had appointed to represent the all-powerful one. There was still tensions among all of the Anunnaki, still fighting over resources and the land of the planet. Marduk had it set in his mind, no matter what it cost, he was going to dominate everything and everyone. Enlil finally had had enough, and his sons and him decided that they were going to put a stop to his tyranny. They went to the caves where they had hid all of their weapons and spaceships. They boarded them and began to fight against Marduk and his clans. This resulted in what we know as the Pyramid Wars. It was the first war that actually involved human beings. There was great devastation throughout all of the ancient world. Then Enlil decided that he was going to finish it once and for all, and was going to use nuclear weapons to end Marduk's reign.